All right, Ian, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming in today.
You're welcome.
Or should I say coming up from Wellington today. An easy warm-up for us here. I've read your bio, but I don't know much about you. How did you end up in the cash business?
In the cash business, well, I joined the Reserve Bank from university, actually, and I started off as an economist working in the economics area. I did some overseas study. I did a sabbatical at the IMF. I've worked in the financial stability area, the prudential area, financial markets, and last 3 or 4 years I've been working in the money and cash area, leading our work on cash system redesign, central bank digital currency, private innovation of money, and also the procurement and distribution of banknotes and coins, old school money.
Old school money. And coming out of uni, you were an economist, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Have some traditional economics training?
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah. I didn't study economics myself, so I can only poke fun.
Yeah, fair enough.
On the topic of normal cash, right, regular cash, right, now that we have digital, right, we have to sort of like classify the difference between everything. You know, is it in real life or is it online? So for normal cash, RBNZ said late last year that you're going to trial this new system to help in rural areas that are sort of losing their access to cash. So can you comment on that? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, actually, just last week we made an announcement that we're now open for applications from towns. So what you're referring to is we're running some cash trials, and the idea there is we'll get about 8 or 9 towns around New Zealand who have lost their banks or lost their smart ATMs, so it's hard for them to transact and for people to get cash. We'll enter into a agreement with these towns, so we'll select 8 towns from around the country, and we'll offer a bunch of options for them. So it could be putting in a smart ATM so that you could not just do withdraw cash, but you could deposit cash, you can make change. This is important for retailers. And we're looking at trialling paying retailers for cash out, because an interesting thing based on our research is that people get their cash, about 30% of where people get their cash from is currently retailers.
Like you go to the supermarket.
You go to a supermarket, you get some cash out when you do a transaction. So you get your cash from about 30% of your cash from retailers, but according to our research, retailers in New Zealand pay for about 75% of the entire cash system. So that's because of direct costs and indirect costs, and you know, some of these costs can be small retailers having to travel to do their banking or pay fees to do their banking, and you know, it becomes, as banks withdraw from rural communities in particular, but even in cities, it's getting harder and harder to do your banking. What we're trying to do is trial what that might look like, and if we're paying retailers for providing that sort of service, you know, does that change the incentives? Does that change the behaviours? The other thing with these trials is looking at keeping the cash within communities, so a smart ATM that has recycling functionality. So you deposit the money in. The way it works at the moment, you know, a cash in transit firm comes along, puts cash into the ATM, you withdraw it, you go to a shop, you pay them. They need to take it to the bank sends it back to the cash in transit firm. So there's a lot of movement there, whereas if you put a $10, $20 note into an ATM and then that's available for the next customer, you know, that has quite an impact on emissions, you know, carbon footprint.
Right. So I mean, physically in the ATM, you've got a dispense pile and then you've got a deposit pile.
Yeah, more or less.
And we want to be able to have one trend into the other.
Yeah. And the machines need to be able to check to make sure that the notes are authentic, like they're not counterfeits, as we certainly don't want the machines can't be spitting out counterfeits, and they also need to make sure that the banknotes are in good condition, you know.
So these rural communities, I read it's towns of size like 1 to 10,000 approximately.
That's right.
Okay, and so when we say that they're losing their access to banks, this is because banks don't see a business case to be in town or even to uphold an ATM. Is that right?
Yeah. We often refer to it as the bank footprint. Now, what the banks say, quite rightly, is they have a presence in a lot of areas. They have a branch. The branches aren't getting used as much, and so they see this as a cost, and then they reduce, close the branch down, and their footprint reduces. So, in the lower half of the North Island, over the last 20 years or so, the number of bank branches and ATMs has fallen by almost 50%, so 45% or something like that. And on the rest of the country, South Island, Upper North Island, it's around the sort of mid to high 30s. So, if physically branches aren't there and you've got cash as a retailer, you're having to travel further and further.
Yeah.
And that's where the costs come into it. So, ways of making it easier for people to access cash. Because when we do our surveys and engage with people through workshops, etc., it's pretty clear, the feedback's pretty clear. People want the option of using cash. Now, some people say, I'd like to use cash much more often. And as it gets harder for retailers to do their banking, they're starting to turn off that option. And some people actually don't, they might prefer to pay for things digitally. They actually don't use cash on a daily basis, but they want the option to use cash, especially if the FPOS is down or, there's a cyclone or an earthquake or something.
So
Cash is king,
Our last big use case, right? This disaster in Hawke's Bay.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to move to talking about introducing digital cash, but we want to be able to maintain real cash, physical cash,
Yep.
but we also want to introduce digital cash.
That's right.
And is one related to the other? For example, the issues from Cyclone Gabriel.
Only in one sense. I mean, one thing. So you're right. One thing that we always say is the work that we're doing on digital cash is not to replace cash. Cash will be available for as long as people want to use it.
Good.
Right. So we have no desire to get rid of cash.
Yep.
Where the connection between physical and digital comes out of lessons from the earthquake, it's sort of there's a few lessons. One is that the cash system is incredibly stretched, so it's losing resilience, and therefore it needs some kind of intervention. But the other lessons, when we think about digital cash that we will issue, we want it to be as similar to cash as possible, and so that's why we're quite focused on peer-to-peer. If I give my nephew $5 for mowing the lawn or something, that's peer-to-peer. I could do the same, with a digital form of cash. It's also private. I mean, cash is anonymous. Any form of digital transaction leaves a bit of a footprint, but we want people to have confidence that digital cash will be private, right? So the Reserve Bank won't be monitoring transactions. Now, obviously, things like anti-money laundering and things like that will need to be taken into account, but by the third-party provider of the wallet or however it works. So that's a sort of a connection, like in times of when the internet's down, when the power's out, we want digital cash to have the same kind of functionality as cash
Right.
has.
So if we have we'll still have those same problems with cash, but introducing digital cash, contactless, or some sort of smart card, perhaps something like this, right? That can still work in rural areas, can still work when
Offline.
you're offline, can still work without the power. Yeah.
Yep.
Where is digital cash in terms of the conversation on CBDCs? Is it a CBDC with a different name? Is that?
That's exactly what it is. So we're out currently consulting on digital cash. It's our second consultation. Our first consultation, we talked about CBDC, central bank digital currencies. And that consultation, I think, was 2021, and we said, hey, there's this thing called a CBDC